Hey, my name is Patrick Long with Soku Systems, and today I just want to walk you through one of the Make.com automations that has saved me hours every week for my writing business. So I've got a business where we produce content for the outdoors and shooting niche, and I've got a team of writers that writes these articles for me. We kind of, one of our angles in the market is that we write human written content. We don't like just generate the articles with AI, and we make a better product that way, especially in our niche. But I've still got to go through and edit all of these articles, and that can be really time consuming. But I'm sure there's a lot of things in your business that are like that are just time consuming things that aren't really like why you do so well in your business, that you don't need your brain really to do these like super monotonous things that are you do on a daily or weekly basis. So when I edit an article, of course, I've got to know my niche and I've got to like be a good editor. But there's a lot about editing that is just a little bit repetitive, things that you don't really need a lot of expert knowledge to do. So when I get an article from a writer, like most of them, they look like this. You got like some basic paragraphs and they're maybe a little chunky in places, but they're pretty boring. The content is great. My writers are great at writing, otherwise I wouldn't keep paying them. But um, there's a lot that we want to do to this content. So when it's all said and done, what I actually do is I have it. So this is the finished version, edited already. I like to cut up the paragraphs to be a little bit shorter, so when I post it on the client's website, it will be, easy to see on a phone. And then I also like to add a lot of bolding to like the keywords inside of every single paragraph, or like the majority of paragraphs. We don't do it on every paragraph because then it kind of loses its meaning, right? So there's two things right there that are just really monotonous, that aren't really, don't take a lot of skill. We're going to chop up paragraphs and then we're going to bold keywords. The next thing I got to make sure is that our headings are like capitalized correctly. I use APA format, but doesn't really matter, just as long as it's not got a really weird capitalization that people wouldn't like. And then the very last thing is I've got to add some FAQs to the end. So this is awesome for SEO or EO, GEO, whatever it's called now. But it's really, well, A, I don't want to pay my writers extra to write these things because they're pretty simple. And B, they're really just annoying to write. So it'd be great if I didn't have to, and I didn't have to pay for them to be written as well. So those four things are fairly simple for us to automate, and they'll save us a ton of time. So now that I've kind of explained all the problem, let's dive into the actual execution of this. Alright, so here we are inside of Make.com, and I've got this scenario here to do the editing for us. I've named it Auto Format Google Doc. I do all my writing in Google Docs. I find it really easy to use between different people and tracking in Notion and things like that. So I've got it here, and you can see that I've got all of these four things that I mentioned before chopped up into their own scenarios. So scenarios, there's a lot of like lingo around make.com about scenarios, sub scenarios, etc. But you can think of a scenario as just like one little function that does usually just one thing. So if you know how to write code at all, you can think about a function. You give it some inputs, it gives you an output, or it does a thing, etc. So you can set up your make.com scenarios to be really big and do a lot of things, or you can try to chop them up to be in smaller sub scenarios and then call them from one giant scenario, which is kind of how I'm doing this here. That makes it a little easier to understand and to edit and change and reuse your code across multiple different scenarios. So because I've actually made this format Google Doc function inside of its own scenario and used a start scenario module here, I'm going to be able to call this from outside in my other scenarios. And all that this scenario is going to need is the URL to that Google Doc, and then it should handle everything else. So, all right, we've got, and then like you would call this when when a writer submits the article. When I do everything else that I need to do when a writer submits an article, I make sure to also call this and pass in the URL, and it'll edit all this for me. And by the time that I get to it, it'll already be done. But for the sake of this, I'm actually going to show you guys, and we're going to do it live with a new article that has yet to be edited. And I'm going to show you kind of one by one. So we're going to start with the shortened paragraphs function first. So I've got it opened here, but it's fairly simple. We'll go into it. You give it a URL. So you can look at your scenario inputs and outputs here. I've got an input Google Doc link. And so I'm going to pass that into this pattern matcher. And this is like a regular expression pattern matcher. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it too much. You can ask your favorite AI to figure it out for you. But basically, in a Google Doc URL, you've got something that says, in some part of the URL, it says document/d/ a big number. And that number is the ID of the Google Doc. So I want to get that ID because I need it to actually make an API call to Google Docs and get it. So inside of Make.com, there's a lot of Google Doc and Google Drive modules that you can choose to use, but there's nothing that like will really give you the article in a really structured format. If you do like get page content, it'll just like return a ton of text and there's no structure there. But if you do an API call here, and as long as you're authenticated, it will return it all in a structured format. So we've got that now. It's just use the URL to go get the actual content in a structured way, and now there are tons of things in that content. There's headings, there's all of the styling is in there. So if you got something left aligned, there's a piece of data in there saying it's left aligned, right aligned, center, etc. All the formatting is in there, all the actual content is in there. So then I've got this, to kind of get rid of some of that, I've got this code module here that will extract the paragraphs. And this is just written in Python. And again, you can get your favorite AI to do this for you. So, and that's exactly what I did here. It'll go through and it'll skip the titles, it'll skip bullets, and I want the paragraphs. So it's going to give me the paragraphs, but I've also got in here if there is a link inside of the paragraph to skip it completely, because what we're going to do later tends to remove your links and breaks those, so we don't want to do that. And I'm specifically looking for paragraphs that are really big right now, so the point of this is to shorten paragraph sizes. So we've got a min word count there, and if the paragraph is already really short, we can just skip it. So anyway, it formats all that data, gets all the paragraphs that we need to look at and look at splitting up, and formats it in a nice way where we can send it off to OpenAI. And you want to make sure that you've actually got some data to send, so I usually add a little filter on here, make sure that there's actually some paragraphs to send. So maybe if we sent some reason we sent a URL to this scenario for Google Doc that's already edited, and it came back and said, oh, there's no paragraphs that need to be split up, it would actually throw an error at the rest of this. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So anyway, again, using your favorite AI chat, you can ask your AI chat to help you make an AI prompt. I find that is always the best way to do it. You just write out what you were going to write out anyway to the chatbot and say, I want all these things. I'm going to give you all these things. I want you to output these things. And it'll format it and explain it in a way that will get you a reliable result in the API call. So I'm usually using OpenAI here, and I tend to use it for most of my API calls, but all the same standards work for Anthropic or Gemini or anything else you want to use. So I'm not going to read through this and go through the whole thing, but add some examples in there. We're going to give it these paragraphs, and I want it to put new lines in there, and then so I can know where it needs to be split up at. But then when we go to update the actual article here on this other side, there's a lot of, inside of that structured article output, there's a lot of like index tracking. So the output will track like exactly which character index this piece of content sits at. And so if we need to split up that content, we need to know exactly where that index is. So if we got a paragraph that starts at index 1000 and we need to split it 100 characters later, we need to know that at 1100 characters, we're going to insert some data. So you'll have to fight with that for a little while, because I did, but we can make another make code module with Python that will, look for those new lines that OpenAI added and split it up and track those indexes. And then we basically just take this and send it back and make a new API call with the changes. So there's a lot that goes into that. It took me a little while to do, but it saves a ton of time. So I'm actually going to run this with this article here. So you can see that this one does definitely have some big paragraphs in it. So we'll just copy the URL, give it right there, hit run. And so this is going to take a little bit of time to run. It doesn't take forever, but this OpenAI request is usually the longest part of it. Okay, so before I did this, I'd be sitting here trying to like say, yeah, okay, well, let's see, it's done, and it just pops up. But anyway, I'd be sitting there trying to say, yeah, this is the best place to do the next paragraph, or maybe here is, whatever. So you can see that it's gone through the entire thing now, and we've got a ton of much smaller paragraphs, and you can tell that it didn't do anything here because there's a ton of links in there. So if you want to change this paragraph as an editor, you still need to do that, but at least you didn't have to change the paragraphs for every single paragraph in the article. So that's done. Only took, probably less than a minute. And then you'll notice that the bolding paragraphs, we're not going to go through it all again because it's extremely similar. And if you go back to my my little rant about making your scenarios functional and modular, I probably should put these things inside of their own scenario. But still, the only two things that actually changed here were the AI prompt. So instead of telling it to put new lines in there, I'm telling it to put, I chose to use markdown style, like double asterisks around text to indicate that it should be bolded. And then this parser has to be updated to look for those asterisks instead of new lines, and the rest of it is the same. So we can run this again and let it go. And then we will come back and look at this again. So I would usually be like, seems like a tough choice, and I'd probably bold that. And then try not to think too hard. You spend too much time thinking about what to bold, honestly, and it really isn't usually worth it. So here in just a moment, it should come through. Yeah, so you can see now it actually also chose to do tough choice right there. And it just kind of bolds most of everything. You notice that this paragraph doesn't get bolded because I put inside of my prompt to skip a paragraph every now and then. We don't want to bold like literally everything because then bolding doesn't mean anything. And honestly, I'm still probably bolding too much. But when you're on a mobile device, which is where 70 to 90% of the traffic is, they're really only going to see one or two of these bolded segments at a time, not 5 to 10 like I can see now. So, alright, we've shortened our paragraphs up, we've bolded things, and now I need to generate those article FAQs. So this one is a bit more involved, but I was really happy with how it turned out. So I'm using another service called Data for SEO to actually go see what the real FAQs are on the search engine page. So this should look familiar. I get the content from the Google Doc in a structured way, and then I have this parser to just go find the title tag and pull out the title. So then I'm going to take the title of the article, and then I'm going to pass it to Data for SEO, and it's going to Google that for me. It's going to search it, and then it's going to find what the people also ask questions are, and it's going to return those for me. So it's actually going to return a lot of other things. It gives you the entire SERP, all the other articles that come up, etc. So again, I've got another parser module to extract that people also ask. You'll notice that I'm using a ton of parsers with actual code, and that's because a lot of this parsing is very possible inside of make.com with make.com modules there's text parsers, there's JSON loaders, etc. But it is quite a headache, and you will get to the end of it, you'll have 10 modules, and then the output will finally be right, and you'll have spent 3 hours doing it. Or you can just do a make code module, and you can ask your favorite AI chatbot and say, hey, I'm going to give you this, I want you to do this with it, and then format it like this, and it'll write the code for you, and you paste it in there, and you're done. The only thing that I would tell you, if you have problems trying to figure out how this all works, this is just a VS Code fork, actually, so all your favorite VS Code shortcuts work in here. What the AI, for me at least, always gets wrong is it always tries to name this output and then never returns anything. So you've just got to hit at the end of your script here, you've got to have a return statement, and that's really different than what we normally do in Python. That's not how Python works usually if you're running like a standalone script, but that's how it works here in Make. So if you're having issues, check that first. Okay. So after we get that structured, people also ask, I need to go and do a little bit of error handling. Always check for errors when you can. Data for SEO is an API service, and it's not like the best thing in the world, so sometimes it can, like I run out of credits and it doesn't really tell me, and it doesn't really auto-top. So I just check here if there's a good response. Sometimes it has a status message, and sometimes it says, hey, you've got no credits. And then also sometimes it just doesn't work at all. So anyway, if it's good, I'll do nothing and keep going. This is the new if-else structure that Make added recently. But if there is an error, I'm going to send myself an email to let me know, and maybe I need to go top it off or check out whatever the error was. But either way, it's still going to keep going, and it's going to do just fine. So here in the merge, if we do the first condition was true, we had like a good result, we'll say, yeah, we're fine. Otherwise, we're going to keep the same value, but we're not going to care about it too much. So now we're going to get the content. So this is the module I was talking about earlier. We can get the document text as like plain text. And the reason I chose to do that here is because I'm going to give it to OpenAI to generate the FAQs. So you don't want to, in my case, I don't want to just ask it, here's the FAQ question, answer it. Because it could like pull out whatever and answer it from who knows what source. I'm actually going to give it my entire written article and say, hey, answer it from this. Because if I have an article and I say A means B, and then in my FAQ I say A means Y, I need it to be consistent. I need to say the same thing. So we'll make sure that happens here. In the prompt, I'm going to say, hey, you're at an FAQ section. Again, get your favorite AI to help you make the prompt. And then, what am I going to pass it here? There's a lot going on. But I give it the article title, so this was the search term. And then I give it suggested FAQs. So this is what comes from data for SEO. And I make sure in the prompt I say, hey, these are suggested. They're not required. If you don't think they fit, don't make them fit, because sometimes the people also ask section can be a little crazy, and like it's really not what you're looking for, not what you're searching for. So it's good to throw them out sometimes. But in my prompt here it says, hey, I need 5 FAQs. Try to use the ones from people also ask. Otherwise, make up your own, and use my article as context. So then it does that. We format those for an API call once more. And then, again, we filter that, make sure we've got some responses, and we make that API call to update the actual article. And you can see that we don't have it put them here at the end. And then, boom, here they are. So it makes this header, centers it, and it correctly formats these to H3s. And, you know, this is all stylistic choices that I chose, but it could be however you decide to do it. So now those are just done. And then the very last thing that I do at the end is to do the format all the headings with APA format. And this actually doesn't use AI at all. It just does it with just some code. It just parses through all of the headings, and then I've got like a custom APA formatter written in there that, again, I use my favorite AI chatbot to help me write. So now that's done, and this got a little messed up because the APA formatter does that, but I'll need to work on it. So now we have like a totally different looking article than we had before, and we can actually go through here, save, name the current version. So I'll say auto editors version, because I'll actually still go through it and, you know, change the actual words and do some real editing. But this is way different and way better than the writer's version that we had here initially. Again, the content is exactly the same. Like, we didn't change any words. All we did was change the formatting. So when I say it's like totally better, you know, the formatting is better. But beforehand, this would take me hours to do. Like, at least if I spent 2 hours editing an article, an hour of it was just doing this monotonous work. So now what I usually do, I can sit back, throw on my text to speech reader, and then just make sure the words sound right and be done with it. So that's the general sense of how Soku systems can like build an automation that will take the monotonous work that will bog you down week to week, and then have it completed in just a few minutes, really, and automatically. A lot of this uses AI. AI is super useful for like parsing those things that are really, really hard to like write hard rules out for in code, and it can pick up a lot of the slack and do things that we wouldn't normally be able to do with regular code. So, and it's super easy to include in make.com, and we can just use it all over the place to make our lives a lot easier. So if you want more info on how to do these sort of things, there'll be plenty more videos on this channel. Go check them out. If you need help building some of these things for yourself and your own use cases and your own business, reach out to Soku Systems, and we will definitely love to talk to you and see how we can help each other.